Welcome, and take a moment to breathe and settle your heart, because this space is meant to be one of clarity, peace, and honest reflection. Here we begin by acknowledging that life is not guided by accidents but by purpose, and that every season, question, and connection carries meaning beyond what we can immediately see. This introduction invites you to place trust at the center of your journey, recognizing that guidance, wisdom, and protection come when you pause, listen, and remain grounded in truth rather than fear or past pain. It is a reminder that discernment grows through patience, that peace does not always announce itself loudly, and that healing often feels unfamiliar before it feels safe. As you move forward, you are encouraged to remain open without being careless, strong without becoming hardened, and hopeful without rushing outcomes. This is a space to release confusion, let go of unnecessary pressure, and allow clarity to unfold naturally over time. Here, growth is not forced, connections are not hurried, and purpose is not measured by urgency but by alignment. You are welcome to step in with honesty, humility, and courage, trusting that when truth is centered, direction becomes clearer, peace becomes steady, and each step forward is guided with intention and care. I want you to understand something deeply and without fear. The person who has entered your life at this moment was not sent to confuse you, harm you, mislead you, or pull you away from truth, and they were certainly not placed in your path by dark forces or deception. They are here because I allowed it, because I saw your heart long before you spoke a word, because I heard prayers you whispered in silence, and even those you were too tired to form into language, because I noticed the ache you carried when you felt unseen, misunderstood, or isolated, and because I knew that your season required more than solitude but less than dependency, more than familiarity but less than chaos, more than comfort but less than illusion, and so I permitted this connection not as an accident, not as a coincidence, not as a punishment for past mistakes, but as part of a deliberate process meant to shape, reveal, mature, and steady you. You are struggling now because your past taught you that closeness often ends in pain, that trust often carries a cost, that vulnerability often invites wounds, and so your heart has learned to hesitate even when something feels different, even when danger does not announce itself in familiar ways, even when manipulation is absent and fear is not the driver. And this hesitation does not make you weak, it makes you human. But it also means your discernment is being retrained because you learn to identify threats through harm rather than through wisdom, through trauma rather than through clarity. And now you are encountering a presence that does not mirror your enemies yet does not behave like your comfort zones either. And that unfamiliarity is unsettling because healing does not feel like survival, peace does not feel like adrenaline, and stability does not feel like intensity. Yet none of that means this person is here to replace your source, diminish your faith, or take authority over your life, because your foundation remains unshaken, your refuge remains intact, and your identity does not shift based on who walks beside you. I have always remained your beginning, and your end, your anchor, and your compass, and I do not send people to become idols or substitutes, but to serve as instruments for refinement, encouragement, correction, and companionship when the journey requires it, just as I place the right people beside others in moments when isolation would have hardened them or when pride would have overtaken them. And in the same way, I am reminding you that not every challenge is an attack, and not every unfamiliar presence is a threat, because the difference between what is sent to harm you and what is sent to grow you lies not in how comfortable it feels, but in the fruit it produces over time. The forces that seek to derail you operate through confusion, secrecy, ego inflation, emotional dependency, manipulation, and fear, while what I allow into your life operates through truth, exposure without shame, challenge without control, and growth that strengthens rather than drains. And that is why this connection stretches you rather than diminishes you, provokes reflection rather than panic, and invites honesty rather than pretense, even when it makes you uncomfortable, because discomfort is not always a warning sign. Sometimes it is evidence that dormant parts of you are awakening, that defensive habits are being questioned, that old coping mechanisms are being dismantled, and that survival patterns are being replaced with healthier foundations. Notice how your inner life responds rather than reacting only to surface emotions. Notice that your clarity, does not disappear when this person is present or absent. Notice that your spiritual awareness is not dulled, but sharpened. Notice that your sense of self does not dissolve into fear or obsession. Notice that when distance occurs, you are not thrown into chaos or desperation, but into reflection. And this matters because anything rooted in control or deception demands constant reassurance, constant proximity, constant validation, while what is aligned with truth remains stable even in silence and separation. You are not being asked to ignore wisdom or override discernment, nor are you being asked to surrender boundaries or rush intimacy, because growth respects timing and alignment honors process. And anyone sent to dominate you would resist your independence, resent your boundaries, rush your vulnerability, or attempt to position themselves as indispensable. Whereas what I allow will encourage maturity, self-awareness, and strength rather than dependency. You fear betrayal because memory still speaks loudly, because the cost of trust is etched into your history. But discernment is not meant to imprison you in suspicion, nor is wisdom meant to isolate you from connection. And I am teaching you how to remain open without surrendering yourself, how to care without losing clarity, how to trust without abandoning identity, and how to observe without projecting old wounds onto new experiences. This person is not flawless, and I am not asking you to romanticize them or place them above truth, because humanity remains human even when intentions are pure. But what matters is posture, consistency, accountability, humility, and the willingness to grow when corrected, because perfection is not the marker of alignment, but fruit is, and you will see fruit not through words or promises, but through actions under pressure, through responses to honesty, through behavior when they do not benefit, and through how they handle moments of misunderstanding or disappointment. Do not confuse exposure with condemnation, because truth illuminates without shaming while deception accuses without restoring, and do not confuse peace with boredom simply because chaos once felt like passion. Because stability can feel unfamiliar to those who live too long in survival mode, yet unfamiliar does not equal unsafe, and calm does not equal absence of depth. You are also being refined in this process because growth is reciprocal, and you are learning that defensiveness is not strength. Walls are not wisdom, silence is not always peace, and avoidance is not discernment. And through this connection, patterns are being revealed so they can be healed rather than hidden, not to break you, but to prepare you for what requires greater emotional, spiritual, and relational capacity. Pay attention to how truth is received, to whether disagreement leads to dialogue or dominance, to whether vulnerability is respected or exploited, and to whether boundaries are honored or challenged. Because alignment does not eliminate tension, but it does eliminate fear-based control. And remember that not every disappointment is a sign of evil intent, because even sincere people fail, stumble, and learn, and the difference lies in whether humility or pride governs the response. You are not being rushed, because urgency without peace does not come from truth, and clarity unfolds through consistency rather than pressure. And while there may be moments of uncertainty, that does not mean danger is present. It may simply mean healing is still in progress. And healing requires patience with yourself as much as with others. Now hear this clearly, because it is essential to your protection and future. I am not meant to be an accessory to your efforts, a name mentioned only when convenient, or a presence acknowledged only in crisis, but the center from which everything flows, because when I am placed at the center of your work, your decisions, your relationships, and your ambitions, order replaces confusion, restraint tempers impulse, wisdom guides timing, and clarity overrides fear. And many people appear successful yet remain empty because they operate disconnected from their source, building without grounding, achieving without alignment, and striving without peace. And while such progress may look impressive, it cannot sustain fulfillment or protection. When you invite me into your work, you gain insight beyond your perspective, discernment beyond emotion, and guidance beyond experience. Because I see what lies beneath appearances, I know which paths nourish and which quietly drain, and I understand motives that words cannot reveal. And when you move without this grounding, you are forced to rely on limited sight shaped by past wounds, fear of loss, or desire for validation. And this is where compromise often enters unnoticed. Fake people are not always obvious, loud or hostile, and many present themselves with charm, agreement, encouragement, or support while operating from insecurity, envy, or hidden agendas, and suspicion alone will not protect you because suspicion hardens the heart, but discernment rooted in intimacy will, because discernment sees patterns over time rather than reacting to isolated moments, and when truth is present, deception cannot remain hidden indefinitely because pressure, boundaries, and patience expose character naturally. Fake people often reveal themselves when they no longer benefit, when they lose control, when consistency is required, or when your growth threatens their comfort. And this is why you must resist rushing access, oversharing prematurely, or confusing closeness with trust, because alignment respects process and authenticity withstands time. Place me in your work not only through prayer but through obedience, through asking whether choices align with values rather than convenience, whether decisions produce peace rather than excitement alone, and whether doors require integrity or compromise, because not every opportunity is approval and not every open door leads to purpose, and what I open will never require you to betray conscience or identity. Understand also that silence can be protection, boundaries are not rejection, and distance is sometimes mercy, and not every separation is an attack, but often preparation, preservation, or redirection, and you do not need to explain your calling, justify your pace, or defend your obedience to those who cannot understand it. Some people gather information not to support but to compare, compete, or control, and guarding what is still forming is wisdom, not fear. Fake people flatter excessively yet resist correction, praise publicly yet undermine privately, agree outwardly yet resent inwardly, and celebrate progress only while it does not challenge their position. And when you remain consistent in truth, they either change or remove themselves, and their departure is not your failure but often your answer. Do not allow disappointment to turn you into what you fear. Do not let wounds harden you into manipulation, performance, or emotional withdrawal, but remain honest, teachable, and grounded, because pride blinds discernment faster than ignorance, and humility keeps your vision clear. You do not need to fight every battle, prove every truth, or defend every accusation, because alignment allows truth to outlast lies and integrity to speak louder than explanation, and fake people cannot destroy what is protected unless compromise opens the door, which is why obedience matters more than appearance and faithfulness matters more than outcome. Remain free by not idolizing results, approval, or success, because when those become your center, you become vulnerable to manipulation. But when I remain your foundation, you are free to wait, free to say no, free to walk away, and free to trust without fear. I am not asking you to fear people, but to remain aware, grounded, and steady, because awareness rooted in truth keeps your heart open and your mind sharp, allowing you to recognize who walks with you for a season, who supports from a distance, and who is not meant to continue further. And this discernment comes not from control but from relationship. Stay anchored, move slowly, observe deeply, act wisely, and remain humble. And I will guard what concerns you, reveal what needs light, remove what threatens peace, and strengthen what is meant to remain. Because where truth is present, deception cannot reign. Where alignment exists, confusion cannot dominate. And where I am centered, your path will not collapse under false intentions or unfamiliar faces. And you will walk forward not driven by fear, but guided by clarity, not ruled by memory, but shaped by wisdom, and not isolated by caution, but protected by discernment. And in this posture you will receive peace, strength, and blessing. Amen. Heavenly Father, I come before you in humility and reverence, acknowledging that you alone see what I cannot see, that you alone know the intentions of hearts, the paths ahead, and the hidden purposes woven into every encounter of my life. And I surrender my confusion, my fear, my questions, and my memories into your hands, asking you to quiet the noise within me and replace it with your steady truth. Lord, you know how past wounds have shaped my reactions, how trust once given became pain, how vulnerability felt costly, and how my heart learned to guard itself even when it longs for connection. And I ask you now to heal what still aches beneath the surface, to cleanse my discernment from suspicion rooted in trauma, and to teach me how to walk wisely without becoming hardened or closed, if you have allowed certain people to enter my life for growth, refinement, or companionship. Help me to see them through your eyes rather than through the lens of fear, and if any presence is not aligned with truth, reveal it gently but clearly in your perfect timing, not through panic or confusion, but through peace and clarity that cannot be shaken. I pray that you remain the center of my thoughts, my decisions, my relationships, and my work, because I recognize that when you are not at the center, confusion quietly takes root even when things appear successful on the surface, and I do not want outward progress without inward peace, nor achievement without alignment, nor movement without wisdom. Guide my steps so that I do not rush what requires patience, idolize outcomes over obedience, or confuse opportunity with approval, and help me to recognize that not every open door is meant to be entered, and not every challenge is an attack, but that you are working through seasons, people, and processes to mature me into who you have called me to be. Lord, protect me from false connections, hidden agendas, and relationships rooted in control, flattery, or manipulation, and sharpen my discernment so that I may see fruit rather than be swayed by words, consistency rather than intensity, and character rather than appearances, teaching me to observe with wisdom rather than react with fear. Help me to remain kind without being naive, open without being reckless, and loving without surrendering my boundaries, remembering that boundaries are not rejection but stewardship of the heart. You entrusted to me. Grant me the grace to be patient, to allow time to reveal truth, to remain silent is protection, and to speak only when words align with honesty and purpose, guarding what you are still forming in me until it is strong enough to stand. Father, remove from me the need to prove myself, explain myself, or defend every misunderstanding, and teach me to trust that integrity speaks louder than arguments, and that truth does not require urgency to prevail. If separation or distance occurs in my life, help me not to interpret it as failure or loss, but as redirection, preservation, or preparation, trusting that you close doors not to punish but to protect, and that you remove people not to isolate me but to align me more deeply with your will. Search my heart as well, Lord, and keep me from becoming what I fear, from allowing disappointment to turn into pride, manipulation, emotional withdrawal, or performance, and keep me humble, teachable, and grounded, knowing that pride blinds discernment but humility sharpens it. I ask you to heal my understanding of peace so that I no longer confuse chaos with passion or stability with emptiness, and help me recognize that calm can be deep, safe, and powerful even when it feels unfamiliar. Strengthen me to trust you more than my emotions, my memories, or my assumptions, and help me to listen to the quiet nudges of your spirit rather than the loud echoes of past pain. Bless the work of my hands when it is aligned with you. Restrain me when my desires outrun wisdom, and guide me step by step rather than all at once, reminding me that clarity often unfolds gradually and that growth is a process, not an instant revelation. Surround me with people who respect process, honor truth, and walk with integrity, and give me the courage to release connections that require compromise, knowing that obedience brings freedom and alignment brings peace. Father, I place my trust in you as my protector, my guide, and my source, believing that what you ordain cannot be destroyed by deception, delayed by fear, or canceled by false intentions unless I partner with compromise, and I choose instead to partner with truth, patience, and obedience. Keep my heart soft, my mind sharp, and my spirit anchored in you, so that I may walk forward without fear, love without losing myself, and discern without condemning, confident that where you lead, clarity will follow. Where you are present, deception cannot reign, and where you are centered, my life will not be easily shaken, and I receive your peace, your guidance, and your protection with gratitude and faith, trusting you completely. Amen.